Hello again, this is Patrick Leary, Vice President of Market Development for Redline Communications. As we said before, Redline is based in Toronto. They are an ISNet World certified developer, manufacturer, and professional services organization that offers industrialized LTE for private networks or for others, as well as proprietary wireless solutions for things like autonomous vehicle use, et cetera, et cetera. But in part 3 of this, I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the other things about CBRS that really kind of make it special. Since 1935, when the U.S. Congress created the FCC under the original Farm Bill, spectrum has always been managed based on ownership, geographically based, right? So that means, and all these geographies, by the way, have been large. So if you own spectrum, say you're Verizon, and you own this very, very, very large license, and you've really built out the urban area, there's still probably pockets of places, especially in rural, where the spectrum is highly underutilized. And the FCC for a long time, and public think tanks for a long time, have noted that this doesn't put spectrum to its best use, right? And spectrum is supposed to be a public asset intended to be put in service of the public, right? So managing spectrum based on property ownership, and then not even necessarily installing build requirements. So you might own spectrum, but hold it just as an asset and not leverage, and not actually use it. That's been kind of problematic. But the technology hasn't really existed to manage that spectrum in any other way. Well, here in CBRS, under this SAS methodology, spectrum will be managed in the time domain. It's a revolutionary concept. It's never been done before, certainly not in this scale. But in the time domain means that there's the opportunity to leverage that spectrum with multiple kinds of users, multiple tiers of priority, that can most efficiently look at the use and say, you know what, this spectrum is being underutilized, this user can come in or whatever. Another thing, in these priority access licenses, the way the rules are written, and this won't change, is that if you purchase one of these licenses at auction, but then you don't build in it, someone can use that spectrum range as a general authorized access or GAA user until such time as you fire up that spectrum. The SAS sees you operating there and then would move the GAA user to some other piece of spectrum. So opportunistically, a GAA user can use any of the spectrum, right, until a PAL fires up or unless an incumbent is existing in that space. It's kind of a big deal. Even in fact, if a priority access licensee is building within its license, but a portion of that coverage, the SAS does not sense any interference, a GAA user would still be able to be assigned in that specific geography. So it's really a big deal. And world over, regulatory organizations, Industry Canada, Ofcom, and Europe are looking at this spectrum management regime with great interest, right? Because when it works, and I say when because I know it will work, when it works, there's opportunities to adopt this to other pieces of spectrum globally. So kind of a big deal. So when the FCC created the spectrum, they said, okay, we're going to leave it up to industry to define the rules. So first, an organization was called the Wireless Innovation Forum. And that group is made up of stakeholders across industry. You name it, it's a who's who, from Google, Apple, the mobile carriers. Everyone has representation in there, right? And they've worked really hard to get to define the rule set for how this SAS will operate, how the interference environment will be managed, and all that sort of thing. Well, it's important to recognize that that process is technology agnostic. It is not based on LTE. It's completely technology agnostic. However, the practical reality is that this spectrum will be dominated by LTE. It's the nature of LTE coming and subsuming every other kind of technology. And so what's happened is another organization was created to do for the CBRS band what the Wi-Fi Alliance did for Wi-Fi many, many years ago. And this organization is called the CBRS Alliance. They held its first meeting a couple of years ago. They had some 45 people, and then it's almost doubled every time. Now it's a who's who, but that particular organization, whose job it is to kind of to market CBRS and kind of ride herd and make sure that things work together, that's become rather powerful and has a lot of strong participation from all the giants in the space, but also including mobile operators, cable operators, wireless manufacturers, etc. And that organization is 100% focused on LTE. So recently, just in the past week and a half or so, the CBRS Alliance has launched what they call their OnGo program. And their OnGo program is basically a certification that says if you have the OnGo logo on your gear, that's a validation that your equipment is operable inside the CBRS environment as an LTE system and can be mixed and matched with the various SAS databases that are out there, as well as the ecosystem of devices and base stations and enhanced evolved packet cores, EPCs, and all this kinds of things that can work together in that ecosystem in a standardized way, right? So they have all the perspective and lessons learned from the Wi-Fi world to apply that to CBRS and LTE, okay? So people should understand and make no mistake that this band will be kind of LTE all the time. And why is that a good thing? So if you're operating a private LTE network, LTE is inherently already more secure than Wi-Fi. But if you're truly a private network and you have your own SIM cards, no one can even access the band, get on the band, right? So it's yours. Nothing else can come in there and intrude, especially if you've got it segmented off physically, and you have the opportunity to operate that not only in a secure way, but if you're using a priority access license in a protected way, as you become your own carrier, right? Which is really a big deal in this space. So there's a couple of the other things that are interesting that's going to make sure this band really takes off is, I think we mentioned earlier, but I'd want to reiterate the point that this will bring global harmonization because the US, for the first time, will be joining the world in its commercial use of 3.5. So you have others who have already committed to deploy 3.5 CBRS, what in the LTE world they call band 48 chipsets in their devices. The Essential phone, which is by the inventor of Android, already has it. Samsung has committed to it. I believe I saw where Apple committed to it. Basically, even if they haven't committed to it, it's going to happen anyway. So you won't be able to buy a device this time next year that does not have a CBRS chipset in it. Okay, so let's talk about timeframes. So if the FCC issues its new and revised report and order that basically revolves around the size of the licenses, if that happens in June, which it's expected to do, there's still some housekeeping that has to happen, right? And that's what's the auction process going to look like, right? The FCC hasn't defined that. So they will issue another NPRM asking for comments. They'll make a proposition to the marketplace about what that auction process should look like. They'll invite public comments, and then they'll decide on that. But my guess is that won't happen till the very earliest, around the end of 2019. So what does this mean? This means that when the FCC issues its report and order on the size of the PALs, that will immediately trigger the ability to use the spectrum under GAA, General Authorized Access. So no matter who you are, even if you intend on getting a PAL at a later date, you'll be able to start deploying gear. And there's gear already out there by people like from our companies and others that are building for this band. You'll be able to deploy gear under the GAA rules. Okay. And then when the auction process comes around, again, probably at early as 2019, then people will start acquiring PALs, and they'll be able to use the band in the protected way. So that's what you can expect kind of from the time frame. And if you want to follow this stuff on a really kind of detailed nature, check in or follow the CBRS Alliance feed, a very, very useful one. If you're more technically oriented, you might be interested in following the Wireless Innovation Forum or the WINN Forum. That one puts out notices about any changes in the rules, this sort of thing. So those are good places to get good, accurate information, because there's a lot of information that isn't accurate. So next, I wasn't planning on a part 4, but there's some other things I think I should mention to dispel some of the fear around the SAS part. And I think I'll do that in my next session here.